So SAP HANA Cloud provides a single place to access, store and process all enterprise data in real time. This cloud native platform that reduces the complexity of multi-cloud or hybrid landscape. SAP HANA Cloud provides all the advantages of your HANA technologies that we saw in the session yesterday, along with cloud qualities such as automatic software updates, elasticity or flexibility, you can even call it scalability, elasticity or scalability, and finally the low total cost of ownership, because it is SAP HANA Cloud. Moving on, right? The SAP HANA Cloud provides simplified data access to connect all your information without the need to have all data loaded in a single storage location. So yesterday we saw very much what is HANA. Now we are seeing within HANA Cloud, and the other flavor is obviously HANA on-prem, right? So we would like to understand what is the difference between this HANA Cloud, HANA on-prem. But I'm sure you have the broad idea of what an on-premise software means and what a cloud software means. An on-premise software is nothing but that it physically resides in your location and is completely managed by the vendor. We saw this, completely managed by the owner or the customer. We saw this yesterday. Compare that to cloud, which is not physically residing in the customer's location. It is on the hyperscalers or the data centers running in a different region and is fully managed by the vendor, right? The owner is the vendor and we get the admin rights to do whatever we want. I mean, not everything, we get the admin rights to perform the functions that we want to perform. So HANA Cloud. What is HANA Cloud? What is its advantages and disadvantages? In a cloud-based installation of SAP HANA, okay, I'm thinking there is minor corrections in the slides. Anyways, in a cloud-based installation of SAP HANA, the system is hosted in a clouds provider infrastructure which can be accessed over the internet. And here are some of the main advantages and disadvantages of the cloud installation. Just ignore the description for now. It will be corrected before it is sent out. The advantages and disadvantages are correct. So as mentioned on the screen, first advantage is that it is cost effective. Cloud installations typically have lower acquisition cost compared to your on-premise installation because companies do not have to invest in the hardware running your on-premise infrastructure or the software license. Instead, they can opt for a subscription-based pricing model or any of the three pricing model that we saw. And they can pay for the resources and the services they use only, which can result in cost saving, especially for small to medium-sized businesses. Second is the scalability and the flexibility. Cloud installation offers greater scalability and flexibility compared to on-premise installations. Business can easily scale up or down their resource and service as their need changes from time to time, without the need for significant investment in additional hardware or infrastructure. Right? So scaling up your system does not mean buying more hardware or infrastructure, but rather simply means adjusting your quota limit or subscribing to new services in SAP BTP. Final advantage is the maintenance and support. The cloud installations often include integrated maintenance and support services provided by the cloud provider itself, which is SAP in this case. And this can reduce the burden of managing and maintaining the systems internally using the IT team as the cloud provider takes care of regular updates, backups, and system maintenance, which frees up the internal resource which that they can concentrate on strategic initiatives. Those are your advantages of HANA Cloud and any cloud software in general. What are the disadvantages, right? Nothing, no technology is completely has just the positives. Obviously, there will be some pros and cons. And in the traditional, the first point that talks about data security and compliance is also a traditional mindset where customers think that once their data is not in their own infrastructure, whether it is residing in a different region or along with data from other clients, even though they are isolated, there is always this uncertainty with the client, right? So even though that cloud software nowadays are very much advanced in providing more security on the cloud, we definitely still have this as a point. Because of the compliance factors, right? There are many compliance in organizations and regions. For example, let you look at if you European framework, you have the constraint that the data produced within Europe should not move outside, should not reside or should not be accessed or should move outside the European region, right? So the data centers, there is a need for those data centers to be residing inside Europe itself, even though if they are on cloud. So that's number one, data security and compliance. So it is important for organizations to carefully review the cloud service providers' security measures and compliance standards to ensure that their data remains secure and compliant with region-specific or organization-specific requirements. And then you have customization and control, right? With these SaaS products, you obviously comes with limited customization in terms of how you want to consume them. Obviously, you build your custom models and you can build any type of artifacts on top of them. In terms of how you want to consume these resources, cloud installations have limitations in terms of customization compared to on-premise. Business have less control over the system configuration, optimization and customization, as these are managed by the cloud service providers. This can be a limitation for organization with very specific requirements that require extensive customization. Finally, all this, since this is on cloud, all this relies on your connectivity, right? You might not notice this more often than not. It relies the data that the analytical processing that you're doing or the data fetch that you're doing sometimes could rely on your internet connectivity, since you're not on premise and connected to a LAN compared to you connected to a LAN or something, and you might notice this time lag, especially when your data centers are crossing oceans, right? When your organizations is in, let's say, North America, whereas your data centers is in Asia, you can notice a different small time lag. Moving on to the on-premise. SAP on-premise. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Again, please excuse me for the description. The on-premise installation of SAP HANA, the system is deployed in company's own IT data center or the infrastructure. And here are the key advantages and disadvantages of an on-premise installation. Starting with data control. With an on-premise installation, companies have full control over their data, including data security, privacy, and compliance. This can be especially important for companies that handle sensitive or regulated data, as they can implement their own security measures and ensure compliance with their specific industry or company. Number two is the customizability. It offers greater flexibility in customizing and tailoring SAP HANA to the specific needs of the business. Organization can configure and optimize the system according to their own requirement, workflow and processes, giving them control and adaptability to their unique business needs. Lastly, performance. It's, as you see, all the disadvantages of cloud is coming to the advantages of on-prem, right? SAP on-prem claims to have more performance just in contrast to the connectivity dependency that we saw in the cloud world. Moving on to the disadvantages of on-prem. To start with, it is the higher upfront cost. The on-prem installation typically requires higher upfront cost for the hardware, software license, and the infrastructure setup. Organizations must invest in these necessary infrastructure, hardware, and software, and may also need to hire additional IT staffs to manage this landscape, which can increase the overall implementation and the maintenance cost. And lastly, scalability and flexibility. On-premise deployments may be limited in terms of scalability and flexibility compared to cloud, because companies need to plan and provision for future growth and the capacity requirements. And scaling up or down may require additional investment in hardware and infrastructures. So that is pretty much about your introduction to SAP HANA Cloud, right? And we have also seen the differences between HANA Cloud and HANA On-Prem. Now that we are very clear, let's create our first HANA Cloud instance on the space that we have. So again, guys, it would be really nice if you guys can follow my instructions on the screen and do it also on your trial account. I hope you're already in your space. I would give maybe 30 seconds for people to be ready. Maybe you can have two windows, one minimized, the Teams window minimized, and your window as well side by side, so you can follow me along while I create an HANA Cloud instance. Okay, I hope you're ready. Feel free to stop me anywhere if I'm too fast, or if anybody is facing any issue while creating theirs. So you go to HANA Cloud on the left. The box would be empty for you here because you don't have an instance created already, and you have the create button on the top right, and we want to create an SAP HANA database. And okay, so now we are in the Cloud Central, and first step, we chose the type that we want to create SAP HANA Cloud instance, and in the general section your org will be automatically picked. In my case, since I have only one org in this address, right, the organization is picked. As I said, what is this org? It is the org that you see in your account, we saw, right? If you have multiple, then you have the option to select under which organization and under which space you want to create this HANA Cloud instance, right? So that is basically what you're choosing here. By default, it is selected for us since we have only one space and one org. Then it is asking you to give a basic name for an instance, right? So let's say Airbus HANA training. This is up to you to decide. I believe it does not allow spaces, just some minor things. And then this is very important to note, guys. Please pay attention to this here and make sure you keep a note of this, right? you are deciding the password for an administrator user called dbadmin. So while you create this instance, the administrator name is same for all accounts because this is SaaS. The dbadmin user, you will need to decide the password. Okay. Retype the password and make sure you save this password somewhere. In my case, I am set the DB admin password as welcome123. Okay, description is optional. Let's go with the default version that it has been selected. These are different releases of SAP HANA, and on the right side you can see other tools like SAP Capacity Unit Estimator. This is used again by the basis team to decide for the capacity that they want, how much would be the cost and so on. We did not go into it. It is another tool by itself, primarily used by the basis team. And you can see as the trial instance, by default, it comes with 30 GB of in-memory, which is your RAM space, and 120 GB of your disk space, right? 30 GB of hot storage, 120 GB of warm storage. It's a 2-core CPU. Also, you can see here. Perfect. Let's go to the next step. Some of the next steps are optional. So here you can change the memory. The storage you cannot change. Here 120 and 2-core CPU. Optional, let's not change. Availability zone, let's not change them. And then finally you have some connection parameters, which IP address do you want it to allow to connect. Let's not change them. And finally you have the option they are asking, do you want to create a data lake along with this HANA Cloud? So let's little bit understand what is data lake, right? So data lake is an SAP HANA Cloud component that composes of relational engine. It provides high performance analysis for petabyte volumes of relational data. Okay, right? So a data lake, any data lake, be it SAP or Microsoft or anything, is used to store huge amount of data in low cost. That's why that's a primary purpose of data lake. And so you can access the relational data, or you can also have files on data lake. You can put your files like your CSV files, XLS files also on data lake. This provides a managed area to basically manage and organize your structured, semi-structured and unstructured data that can be stored in these data lakes. Data lake is available in different configuration. You can integrate it into SAP HANA Cloud, or you can provision a standalone data lake instance. So in the sixth option that you're seeing here, where you first started with creating a HANA data lake, HANA Cloud instance, and it is asking you, do you want to create a data lake integrated with this database instance, right? This is the integrated one. Or you can also have a standalone data lake where from step 1 you start by creating a data lake instead of HANA Cloud instance. You can enable or disable the data lake relational engine component when you provision the data lake instance, which is basically what you see here. For now, we don't want. Let's review and create our HANA Cloud instance. And let's hit create instance. Okay, yes, now it is in creating state. And once it is done created, what you should be able to see is, let's go back to our trial account. Here also you can see that the same HANA instance that you gave name, right? Airbus HANA training creation in progress. Once it is created, it should show a green button with a running or started message. Okay, I hope few of you have come to this section. We will revisit this. It will take some time. We will revisit this page after a few slides and we can see if it has been created or not. So let's look at our HANA Cloud instance. Is it created? Awesome. So most of you would also see this on your screen. The HANA database instance that we created has been created, and if you go to the HANA Cloud Central, then you can see that it should be in a running state. Please note that since this is a trial account, at end of each day, when the system becomes idle and you're not using it anymore, the trial instance automatically goes to a stopped state, and tomorrow when you want to again access this, you need to come back to your HANA Cloud Central, click on these three dots on the right on the actions, and you can start or stop. Right now only stop is visible because it is in the running state. The reason that I'm saying this is in the BTP trial, you wouldn't see a difference. It will still be in created green state only, even if it is stopped, but you will have to come to the HANA Cloud Central to once again start it. And you need not go to the create button to the HANA to launch the HANA Cloud Central because it is trying to create a new instance, right? Rather, there is also an action button on the HANA database instance that has been created. And the first one you can click on Open HANA Cloud Central, which again opens this page for you. So just touch base on what we did. We created a global account in US region and a sub account named dev, a sub account in the same global account name, auto generated name was created in the same region. Since it is a trial account, we had the entitlements assigned to that global account, which let us create a HANA Cloud instance. Before we went to the instance, we did also create a BAS instance on the sub account level, and in the sub account we enabled Cloud Foundry runtime, and inside the Cloud Foundry runtime we created a space called dev, and in that space we have now created an HANA Cloud instance on top of which database artifacts can be created. Okay, I'm sure now most of all of us have a very fair and a good understanding of the BTP structuring and what these jargons mean. Any doubts, guys, on this? Take that as a no. And then let's look at the variety of HANA Cloud tools that we have. Right, so the tools can be broadly classified into these four categories, or even the tools themselves, right? So starting with the SAP HANA Cloud Central, which we did use already to create our HANA Cloud instance. The same central is used to manage your HANA Cloud instance, where you can start your HANA Cloud, stop your HANA Cloud, restore backup, increase the memory, increase the storage space, or even later, if required, you can integrate and data lake into the same. So that's number one, HANA Cloud Central, which lets you create and manage SAP HANA Cloud instances on BTP. Number 2 is the SAP HANA Cockpit, and this is another browser-based tool that lets you administer and monitor any SAP HANA database that you have created in your BTP account. We will also see this tool today. This tool is primarily meant for basis team, and the administrative activities are done using the HANA Cockpit. So in our section where we talk about the administration capabilities of HANA Cloud, we will be looking at the HANA Cockpit as well today. Moving on, we have next two set of tools that are majorly used by the developers. So the first two tools, the persona is the basis team or an infrastructure team, the administrator, whereas the second two tools that we are going to discuss is from a developer perspective. The first one is called SAP HANA Database Explorer. Again, it is a browser-based tool that lets you query information about the SAP HANA database or the custom catalog objects that you have created. Catalog objects refers to the database artifacts that you have created in the HANA database. These database artifacts could be tables, virtual tables, procedures, graphical calculation views, SQL calculation views, functions, and so on. So note the word catalog objects. It will be used in other places as well. They in general refer to any database artifact in HANA Cloud. So the database explorer, what you can do, the database explorer is primarily used to run analysis queries. Let's say you simply want to data preview something. Let's say you want to write a small select statement with a filter condition, right? Those kinds of things can be done in the database explorer. And finally, we have the most widely used tool by the developer, which is your integrated development environment, either Web IDE or Business Application Studio. Both of these tools can be used to develop and deploy database artifacts, in other words, catalog objects, to HANA Cloud. And note that any type of developer, for example, be it an UI5 developer or even the Node.js developer or the application developer, along with the database developers, all of them use the same tool. So this tool is used not just for HANA database development, it is also used for application development on BTP. And from here, the application gets deployed to your BTP sub-accounts. When you are just looking at the database, then you connect your Web IDE or BAS to the database instance that we just created, and we will be deploying the database artifacts to an HDI container in that HANA Cloud instance. HDI container, right? It is a word that we learned yesterday, and we will see more about it in today's and the upcoming session as well. Moving on. This is a very high level representation of the HANA Cloud architecture. It has here also we are mentioning a bit of internal components and also external components that can communicate with SAP HANA Cloud. So let's first look at the internal components of HANA Cloud. We saw that in the SAP HANA Cloud, while we created the instance, we have the option to create an SAP HANA database along with the data lake, which is an optional one. So the SAP HANA database is an in-memory database with all the capabilities and features that we saw yesterday. It lets you do graphical modeling, graph-based spatial modeling, graph-based modeling, machine learning models on predictive algorithms can be built, and here you basically build all your custom data models, SQL or graphical. The data lake is used to store both your structured, semi-structured and unstructured data, and primarily data lake is intended to store a large volume of data in low cost. And if you compare this setup to what we learned yesterday in the data temperature or the dynamic tiering concept, within HANA database, yesterday we told we will have the hot and the warm storage, and the cold storage is stored externally to the HANA database. And the data lake is exactly that. Data lake is your cold storage where you will store the data that are very rarely used, but you still want to retain that information. And this is generally years and years of data that takes up a large volume in HANA database. Hence, to reduce the cost, we are pushing it to cold store data lakes. And within your HANA database, you have both your hot and warm storage. And the data movement between hot and warm storage is automatically taken care by HANA database based on what is the data that you frequently accessed. Whereas the data movement between the cold and your HANA database has to be configured or has to be taken care from a developer perspective. Okay, so that's the internal components of SAP HANA. And along with these internal components, we know that we also have the EIM component, which has the smart data integration feature, which lets you access external data sources, SAP or non-SAP, depending on what data source that SDA supports. If SDA supports the data source, then you can you can consume data from the data source using SDA only without need for additional licensing. And once depending on the source, you get two types of data access. One is your virtual access, second is data replication. Virtual access means that you are not moving the data from data source to your HANA Cloud. Rather, you are virtually or remotely accessing the data that is residing in the data source. Compare that to data replication. You are accessing the data that is in the data source, and also replicating that, meaning storing a copy of the same in your HANA Cloud. Depending on your business use case and the freshness of data that you want in your reporting layer, you would either decide to go with a virtual access or replication. What do I mean by freshness of data? Because when you're accessing something virtually, it is always real time, right? The data that is there in your data source, let's say there are 100 rows, all those 100 rows come up in your HANA Cloud virtually, remotely or virtually accessed. And it can be pushed and it can be displayed all the way to the visualization layer where you get real-time data. Compare that to replication, where you might be scheduling the data replication either on hourly basis or daily basis, depending on your needs, and the data is not real time. It is scheduled or replicated. Other than the SDI feature, let's say there are some data sources that are not supported in SDI, then you would use an ETL tool, be it SAP or non-SAP ETL tool, to push your data into SAP HANA Cloud, right? It most often than not, it will require a licensing cost to it. And since SDI does not have the capability to consume data from such a data source, we will use an external ETL tool to push data into SAP HANA Cloud. And in that case, whenever you are using an ETL tool, the mode of data access is always replication, right? SDI only gives you virtual or remote access, whereas you are using ETL tool, you always need to replicate the data into HANA Cloud. Finally, your top layer, once you have gotten all the data from your data source, either virtual or replication into your HANA Cloud, you will build your custom data models that follows the business logic. And finally, the measures and the dimensions that you want to visualize in the reporting layer is consumed in any BI tool, right? Some of the BI tools are mentioned here are SAC Analytics Cloud, which is a dashboarding tool. DataSphere or data warehousing is a data warehousing technology. And you also have, you can also build applications, right? You build applications on top of HANA Cloud. Those applications also can access your models and data. And finally, any third-party application like Tableau or Power BI can consume this HANA Cloud models and create visualizations and charts on these data models. So that's basically with respect to your HANA Cloud architecture. Any doubts, guys, here? Okay, I think no doubts then. The next slide I want to talk about is the HANA deployment infrastructure, that stands for HDI in short. So the high level architectural representation of an HDI container is represented on the right. Basically, let's look at, before we look at what HDI container means or how they are architecturally placed inside HANA Cloud. HDI container basically provides a service that enables you to deploy database artifacts to these containers. And what are the database artifacts? They include this consistent design time artifacts, namely tables, views, or procedures. These artifacts are modeled, staged, built, and deployed into SAP HANA Cloud, and in particular into an HDI container. Developers can bind their application deployed in the same space to a database instance or HDI container. SAP Business Technology Platform applications are bound to HDI containers. Every application requires a minimum of one dedicated HDI container. SAP HANA deployment infrastructure basically provides you a service that enables you to deploy these database artifacts. So you can deploy the database artifacts only into an HDI container in XSA mode of development. Yesterday we saw the difference between XS Classic, where you deploy objects into a schema-based logical separation. Now let us look at the architecture of the HDI. So you have this HANA database, which is your HANA Cloud instance, And inside that HANA database, we have multiple HDI containers. So inside this HDI container only, we are going to deploy our objects, right? So this HDI container will contain one master schema. So when you create an HDI container, we need to provide a schema name for that container, and it will create that master schema, and all your database objects are deployed to that master schema only. And automatically an user is created who is the HDI container object owner. And this restricted user, this is a restricted user that you cannot log in using user ID or password. It is an auto-generated one. There is no password to this user. This restricted user owns all the objects that are deployed in the HDA container. And the object owner basically acts only in your integrated development environment. When you build or deploy any object from your web IDE, this object owner is the user that is used to deploy, and he owns all the objects in the master schema of HDA container. So does the HDA container have only one schema in it? No. It has only one master schema, but it also has other supporting schemas that is represented in this box inside the same HDA container. Here you already have some of the system generated views, procedures, and so on. Right, in your HANA Classic, we used to have a schema called sysbi and sysbic. They are no more. They are system generated schemas where your runtime objects goes in HANA Classic. Compare that to here, you have such system generated schemas within each HDA container itself, along with the master schema. So that's the setup of an HDA container. Now HDA container can be logically grouped into container groups, meaning you can have multiple HDA containers. You can group them into something called as HDA container group. And this is simply for organization perspectives. So you can apply configurations directly to the HDA container group, and the configurations will be trickled down to all the HDA containers within that group. This is optional, and you might not need an HDA container group every time. And both this HDA container and the group is in communication with the HANA SQL processor engine, with which it talks to other tools such as your HANA HDA container client or your development environment, BAS or IDE, and so on. I've also included a link to HDI documentation from SAP side, and this is the standard documentation that includes everything right from creating your HDI, managing your HDI, creating HDI container groups, managing them, and so on, right? And so do check it out after this training, but most of the concepts we'll be covering in the upcoming days. Okay, enough talking. Now that we have spoke about the HDI container, let's maybe also create an HDI container in our BTP subaccount. Okay, just to check again, our HANA instance is created and running. So the way we create an HDI container is you have to go to instances on the left, because each HDI container that you create is going to have an instance for that. Let me quickly delete these before. Let me wait for some time. So my screen is same as your screen. You would see only one instance in your section. Basically, the HANA Cloud instance that you created. You can see the service type. It's HANA Cloud, and no application is bound to it, and no service key is created. We'll see what they are in a moment. So this is how your screen will also look. And in the service instance tab on the top right corner, you can click on create, and we want to create a service instance. And it's asking you which type of service instance you want to create. Let's search for HDI. So we are going to use, I think we can use either of it. One is a trial service, another is the actual one. So you can use the HDI container schema, the normal one, and the plan you need to select as HDI share. So note that for an HDI container service, this is the service name and the plan is going to be HDI share. Let's give Airbus-HDI. Let's say next, and we say create. Awesome. It says the instance with the name that we gave is created. You can go inside and see the service and the plan you created. Every instance has an instance ID to it. The runtime environment is Cloud Foundry. No applications or service key is bound to it. Okay, so something important to note here is, so in this HANA Cloud instance called Airbus HANA Training, we have created one HDI container called Airbus HDI, and every HDI container that you create will have a service instance to it. So you can have any number of HDI container in this HANA Cloud instance, but each of those container will have one service in your BTP cockpit. So you can see them, right? And that is one key takeaway. And there are multiple ways to create your HDI instance. This is one way that we saw using the graphical user interface in BTP to create a service instance. Rather, HDI container can be created using SQL in Database Explorer also, and HDI containers can be created directly from your business application studio or web IDE where you are going to develop, right? But in a project where it is where you're which is not starting from scratch, rather you're developing new features on it, all this setup like the HDI container and all will be already done, and you can bind your web IDE to the existing HDI container instance on BTP and continue the development on top of what is already there. Any doubts or issues that you guys are facing in creating an HDI container instance on BTP?
Not from my end.
Thanks.
No,
awesome.
It's okay.
Awesome. So I believe all of you guys are inside your trial account. The issues that we faced in the morning is not prevalent anymore. Anybody still facing that issue? Not able to log in or not able to create an HANA Cloud account? Okay, great. Then I think all of us are on the same page. We have an HDI container created on the BTP. Cool. So I would leave that HDI container for now as it is. We will be using that again in the next session, and we would little bit move on to other topics that I want to touch base today. It is basically from the administration perspective, right? So we looked at the HANA Cloud Central first. We used the HANA Cloud Central as a tool. Second, I told you that we are going to use HANA Cloud Cockpit as another tool, right? So let's look at HANA Cloud Cockpit, which is used to administer and monitor your HANA database that we have created. And in the upcoming sessions, we will look at the more developer-oriented tools like the Database Explorer or Web IDE. So in theory, right, your SAP HANA Cockpit is for an basis team who can administer who ideally has created that HANA Cloud for you, and they are the one administering that HANA Cloud as well. And it can be done in the cockpit. It offers four major features, starting with administration of that instance, monitoring of that instance. How is it running? How is it going? Is there any risk that you see in the future? Monitoring, and the security aspects of it, like data encryption, and what are the external IPs that you are allowing to connect in your HANA cockpit, communication scenarios, and so on. And finally, your user management, creation and management of users and roles is also done in the HANA cockpit. So let's look at a deep dive into HANA Cockpit in our demo session, and I will help. And to log into the HANA Cockpit, you will be logging in using a database user who has access to use that HANA Cockpit. So let's go back to our HANA Cloud instance on the left, and in the action button, you also have this open HANA Cockpit, and also it also says in the description to monitor or administer. So let's open that. Here, I told you it is going to ask you for a database user. Remember, we set the password for the DB admin, who's the administrator of this database. So let's use DB admin, the password that we set while we creating the HANA Cloud instance. So the URL may slightly change for each of you because all of us have created our own HANA instance. So I request you to navigate and open this HANA instance that you have created from your BTP cockpit itself. So once you are here, you can see your high-level database overview. This is the name of your database, and it says in the bracket that you have logged in with the DB admin user. Can also look at it for the details. You get the host ID, which is the same as the database ID that we got from the copy instance ID, the same as the database ID, followed with a predefined template that lets us know the region in which we have created our HANA Cloud. Status is running and you're logged in using dbadmin. The main reason why it is showing which user you have logged in with is because what the tiles and the information that you see on the screen totally depends on the privileges that this user has. Since this is the admin user and we have logged in using the admin user, we are able to see all the sections of the cockpit and this is the header sections and all the tiles inside each of those header section. You can also log in with a different user here. Okay, so let's look at each of the high-level sections that we saw in the presentation, starting with administration.